Hey, I'm Nate from Christchurch, Montevideo. And earlier this week, my mom told me a story from my childhood that I don't remember at all. Now, she couldn't remember all the details, but apparently, when I was about 12 years old, my family had plans to go to the movies one night. Now, I was really excited to see this movie, but my mom said that day I misbehaved badly. We don't remember exactly what I did, but it must have been serious enough because the punishment was that I couldn't go to the movies after all. So I had to stay home while my little brother and little sister went with my parents. Pretty painful. And the best I could do was watch the trailer at home, but I don't think that was much of a consolation. If anything, it made it worse. My mom said I was super disappointed, obviously, and she was sad, but as you parents know, sometimes you have to back up the discipline you threaten, and hey, it worked, because I'm an angel now. But I think Moses can relate to me. See, we've been doing this series on the mountains of the Bible, talking about the big stories of huge events that happened there and how God used them to communicate deeper concepts all throughout the scriptures. Things that are actually really relevant to you and me today. And really, you could do a whole series on the mountains of Moses alone. And there's all kinds of major mountain moments all throughout his story. Even though the only mountain or the main mountain that comes to your mind when you think of Moses is probably Sinai. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago with Pastor John. I want to go back to Moses to ponder a lesser known peak. Mount Nebo, the last mountain of Moses. It's here where I think he experienced something like I did when I was 12, but on a much bigger scale. Because if you remember the story, Moses led the Exodus out of slavery in Egypt and toward the promised land that God pledged to his people. It's going to be a place, he said, where you're going to have satisfaction and rest and where you can finally feel at home. But that generation, they refused to believe God and his promises. They actually rebelled against his plan and wanted to go back to Egypt, the land of their slavery to evil. And so God declared that now only the generation of their children would be allowed to enter into the promised land. So Moses and a couple of other faithful men would go in with this next generation. But at the end of Deuteronomy, the last of the 5 books of Moses that you'll hear called the Torah, God says to Moses, "It's your time." And he led him up a tall mountain, Mount Nebo, across the Jordan River from the city of Jericho in Israel. Now, with an unparalleled view, the Lord showed him the glorious promised land, what Moses had been desiring and longing to see. But God reminded him, "You will see the land only from a distance, but you will not enter the land I'm giving to the people of Israel. I've let you see it with your eyes, but you will not cross over into it." Moses died there on that peak. And it says the Israelites grieved for Moses until the time of weeping and mourning was over. So what happened? I thought Moses was exempt from this generation ban. Well, a little while after the rebellion of the people, Moses had his own moment of failure. See, the account records that the people were dying of thirst in the desert, and they were grumbling and complaining to Moses, as they had done constantly for years and years, and Moses just snapped. Because God had told him gently, "Speak to this rock, and I will make water of life flow out of it for all these people." And for Moses, this is the guy that saw God push back the waters of a sea. So a rock responding to human speech like that wouldn't have been that crazy of a concept. Instead, Moses didn't believe God, he didn't trust God, and he didn't represent him well, his perfect character well, in front of all the people. And so in his anger, he reacted and he just whacked that rock twice with his staff. Now, God still made water, the water they desperately longed for, come out of that rock. But that was the end of the promised land hopes for Moses. And so here he was, years later, standing on Mount Nebo, undoubtedly filled with disappointment and regret. He's seeing a trailer of sorts, but unable to go. But this is the same Moses who arguably had the closest relationship with the God of the universe out of anybody. I mean, this was the guy, God went to him on Mount Horeb, which is also known as Sinai, and said, I'm going to put my power in you so you can do my mighty works. I'm going to put my words in your mouth so you can speak the words of liberation to the nation of Israel. And it was Moses who established the tabernacle tent where God could dwell among his people, and where the people could have their failures forgiven so they could make things right with him. Moses was the guy who went up that mountain, burning with the fire of God's presence, to meet with him on the people's behalf. Moses had God's power and his words, but most incredibly, Moses actually saw God. See, Exodus says that one time Moses went up to meet with God, and God showed him his glory, but just in passing. But it said Moses, his face was changed. It glowed because of his contact with the Lord. And it took time for that light to go away. He absorbed the light of the Lord because God is light. For the people of Israel, there was nobody like Moses. So when he died on Mount Nebo, after seeing the promised land, it was said, since then, no prophet has arisen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. For no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. And that's a really important statement because Moses actually had announced this prophecy of God, that a prophet like Moses would come. And the Old Testament informed the Israelites that they would know it was him because he would have the power of God, the words of God, and he would know God face to face. And we know that in the time of Jesus, whoever Moses was talking about had not come yet because the people were still waiting for him and looking for him. John, a disciple of Jesus, recorded in his book that when the people saw the miraculous sign that Jesus performed, they began to say, surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world. And later, on hearing his words, some of the people said, surely this man is the prophet. So his power made them think that it was him. And his words made them think that. And the start of John's gospel really clears things up for us. It says, in the beginning was the Word, referring to Jesus. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The Word became flesh, became human, and made his dwelling among us. We've seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. And here it is, no one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God, is in closest relationship with the Father. He's revealed God to us. Because God not only filled Jesus with his power, Jesus is his power. God not only filled Jesus with his words, Jesus is the Word. And Jesus not only saw God and knew God, he was in closest relationship with him because he is God. He didn't just reflect the light of God. He is light. In fact, one time Jesus did go up a mountain to meet with God the Father, and it says his face was changed, transformed. And wouldn't you know it, he was standing next to Elijah, who we talked about last week, and Moses. But didn't Moses die on Mount Nebo thousands of years before that? And this is where the story gets good, because remember when I said that Moses' sin was the end of his promised land hopes? Well, that wasn't completely accurate, because he would eventually enter in the ultimate promised land that God has prepared for all of those who trust in Jesus, that he's the one that removes our failures that keep us out. And now that is available to all of us. Apparently, this was the ultimate desire of Moses all along. Because the author of Hebrews, referring to Moses and all these other heroes of the faith, said, these people were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised in their lifetimes. For God had something better in mind, so that they would not reach perfection without us. And all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, like from Mount Nebo. Admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Now, this same author makes it clear that this invitation, the promise of a land that's full of rest and satisfaction, where we can finally feel at home, that promise still stands, and it's open for you and me. Because in the last pages of the Bible, in Revelation 21, God brought another man up a high mountain to look down at the ultimate promised land to come. It's this disciple John I mentioned. See, this peak, identified only as the high mountain of Revelation, is where God showed John the future glorious renovated earth that we're all desiring and longing for. And even though John wasn't allowed to go in at that point, just like Moses, eventually he will. And this is the country that Moses was really waiting for. The city that God is preparing for those who trust in Jesus. So to fulfill what Hebrews 11 predicted, God won't be ashamed to be called our God. In fact, here it says, they will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. And unlike that little tabernacle, here, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. It was said of Moses that he knew God face to face, but John had written, no one has ever seen God until Jesus came and showed us his glory. Well, here in the future kingdom, it says they all will see his face. They will all see God's face. We'll be changed by the God who is light. In fact, there will be no night because the Lord himself will be our light. Now, I think this is so cool. Remember when Moses died on Mount Nebo? It says the Israelites, they grieved for Moses until the time of weeping and mourning was over. And here in Revelation 21, the time of weeping and mourning is over, but forever. It says God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. It's over. It's almost as though God is rewriting all of the wrongs. Because curiously, where Moses failed to talk to the rock that spilled out the water of life for all those people, Jesus here in the last pages of the Bible has the most profound personal invitation. Because Jesus actually revealed that he symbolically was the rock that Moses hit. And yet he gives out water of life despite our failures. He says, come, let anyone who is thirsty come, and let the one who wishes take the free gift of the water of life. This water that makes us never thirst again represents the love and the joy and the satisfaction that we're always looking for here in this life, but are never able to completely grasp. So yeah, Just like when I couldn't go to that movie, we can all think of disappointments in our life, especially the ones where we are at fault. We have a lot of regrets in this life, and we get frustrated when it's not our fault. I mean, we live in a world that's unjust, there's a lot of unrest, and there's pain. So whether you're a believer or not, we will experience disappointments and unfulfilled desires in this life. And many of us have this deep longing and need for peace and belonging and rest. But see, that promise of satisfaction isn't just for the future, because Jesus says to you and me right now, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, I will give you rest. So wherever you're at with Jesus right now, I would just encourage you to ask him for more faith, to trust in him and his promises. Even when we feel like we're on the top of Mount Nebo, looking down at this trailer of what we wish our life would be like. Let's go on that high mountain of revelation, looking forward to our ultimate home country. And in light of that, let's do what John did. Let's go down that mountain and enjoy God now and all those aspects of joy of that future kingdom that are here already. And let's give people a glimpse of the real thing with our love, our joy, and our peace.